Varos stood upon the terrace of Astapor's palace, gazing out over the sprawl of freedmen's quarters and the myriad banners that signified the consolidation of Slavers Bay under Daenerys Targaryen's banner, fused with his own Valyrian might. He could still taste the brine in the air, a remnant of the sea winds that swept in from the bay, hot and tinged with the scent of exotic spices from the newly bustling markets. The city's transformation was astonishing. No longer the heart of a slave empire, Astapor now pulsed with free commerce and the energy of those liberated from shackles. Red-robed priests of the Lord of Light roamed the streets, offering guidance, proclaiming the dawn of a new era, a triumphant melding of old Valyria's flame and Daenerys's relentless pursuit of freedom. Yet Varos's fiery eyes could not ignore the swirling shapes in the distance. Half a dozen dragons taking flight, newly grown or newly arrived from the remote enclaves that had once hidden them. Their roars resonated through the warm air, intermingling with the bustling clamor of a city forever changed. The conquest had indeed reached its climax in Slavers Bay, with Yunkai and Meereen capitulating, some by choice, others by necessity, to Daenerys's unstoppable coalition of freedmen, Unsullied, Dothraki, and Varos's ancient Valyrian legions. The entire region now lay under their dominion, forging a new order that claimed to be righteous yet wielded a draconic power unmatched for centuries. But so many questions loomed, and the greatest, perhaps, was how far this dominion intended to reach. He turned at the sound of footsteps, seeing a small group approach: Jon Snow, Oberyn Martell, and Daenerys Targaryen herself. Each bore the marks of exhaustion and triumph, tempered by introspection. Daenerys, clad in a simple but elegant sleeveless tunic of pale blue, radiated quiet authority. Jon wore dark leathers enhanced with red accents, an emblem bestowed upon him in acknowledgement of his bond with Daenerys's cause and with the dragons themselves. Oberyn sauntered in fluidly, exuding that confident swagger he always carried, even in foreign lands. They halted at Varos's side, each glancing over the city's newly raised fortifications and the partial construction of enormous domes in the distance. Grand dragon pits, carefully planned to shelter the growing number of draconic beasts that now served the new empire. Daenerys spoke first, her voice subdued. "Word came this morning. Our forces have completed the subjugation of Slavers Bay. Meereen's last rebellious enclaves have been purged or persuaded, and the freedmen's councils now hold sway throughout. The slavers who remain have sworn oaths to abide by our laws, and we've placed garrisons to ensure compliance." Oberyn's lips curved into a faint smile. "A monumental feat, Daenerys Stormborn. You have achieved in months what others might never accomplish in a lifetime. The entire bay kneels. Well, kneels to your vision of freedom, at least. I doubt they could muster the courage to defy your dragons, even if they wanted to." Jon gave a thoughtful nod. "They've no choice. The freedmen outnumber them now, and they know the price of any betrayal. It's a precarious peace, but it's better than the slaughter we once feared. Astapor itself is living proof that the freedmen have embraced a new life." Varos's eyes flicked between them. "Indeed, though we must never forget that fear can spark treachery. For now, the region stabilizes, but only under the watchful threat of our might. The freedmen are eager to help build the new world, and those slavers who persist are few, bound by pacts and dread. Yet beyond our borders, the next question beckons: Volantis." At that last word, silence ensued for several heartbeats. Volantis, largest of the free cities, stood close to Slavers Bay, a powerhouse of trade and arguably the oldest of the Associ city-states that prided itself on wealth, devout worship of the Lord of Light among certain factions, and a storied aristocracy. Daenerys folded her arms, exhaling. "Volantis is indeed the immediate neighbor. If we intend to expand our influence, it's the logical next step. But do we truly need to expand so soon? We have enough on our hands forging order here, not to mention building these grand dragon pits." She gestured to the half-finished domes visible in the distance. Teams of freedmen laborers, overseen by Valyrian architects, worked under the scorching sun, erecting vast frameworks of stone and reinforced columns that would eventually house and shelter the rising brood of dragons. Their roars and the beating of colossal wings had already prompted the design of specialized structures to corral them, ensuring that the cities did not suffer endless destruction from untrained beasts. Oberyn fanned himself with a casual grace, stepping closer to the terrace edge. We have the freedmen to incorporate, the new legions to train, and the daily tasks of governance. Indeed, pushing toward Volantis might stretch us thin. But ignoring it could be risky. It's a hub of commerce with ties to many other free cities, and they might fear or resent our new empire. If they decide to preemptively strike or ally with other powers to contain us, we could face a war we aren't prepared for. Jon's gaze flicked to Daenerys. We should weigh that carefully. The Freedmen's Councils have asked for your presence in Meereen to quell smaller factions of slavers rumored to be plotting in the catacombs. We can't simply march on Volantis if our hold here remains fragile. But at the same time, as Oberyn says, ignoring them might embolden them to strike first. Varros shifted his stance, robes swirling around him as a gust of wind passed. The Lord of Light's flame shows me many paths, but none with absolute clarity. Some paths see us forging an alliance with Volantis, harnessing its wealth and trade to further unite the East under our cause. Others see confrontation, should the Triarchs or powerful nobles fear the end of their slave markets. If we choose to approach them, we must be decisive. Daenerys nodded slowly, turning to gaze over the city again. Far below, freedmen carried stones for the second domed enclosure that would form another Grand Dragon pit. She thought of how much the region had changed, from constant cruelty to a sense of communal effort. People were not just building structures. They were forging the symbols of a newly reborn Valyria, an empire reminiscent of antiquity, but guided, she hoped, by kinder principles. I say we send a diplomatic envoy first. If Volantis is open to letting slavery die within its walls, we can pursue peaceful integration. But if they resist, we must be prepared to stand firm. We can't free one region only to watch slavers flourish next door. Oberyn's eyes glinted with amusement. Always the idealist, Daenerys, yet also the conqueror who rides dragons. A balancing act, to be sure. And if their Triarchs refuse, if they cling to their ancient ways as fiercely as you cling to your dragons. Varros spoke in a level tone. Then we break them. The old ways must fade, or the living remain trapped in endless bondage. Our success in Slavers' Bay proves we have the power, but a diplomatic approach is wise. We allow them a chance to join willingly. The threat of dragons might suffice to push them into compliance. Jon let his breath out slowly, turning from the sight of the half-constructed domes. The Freedmen's Councils might appreciate seeing us use diplomacy before war. It reassures them we're not mindless conquerors. And if Volantis defies us, well... He left the end of that sentence unsaid, knowing that the answer was obvious. Dragons and legions. Daenerys gestured for them to come inside, away from the scorching sun. They stepped through a tall archway into a spacious corridor that led to the palace's main council chamber. Freedmen architects had refurbished the space, removing the old slavers' regalia. In its place, banners of Daenerys's three-headed dragon and Varros's stylized flame dragons hung side by side. Here, an elongated table awaited, scattered with recent updates from Meereen, Yunkai, and Astapor. Clerks and scribes bustled about, carrying scrolls back and forth, ensuring the new Freedmen's Councils had the resources they needed. They took their seats, a small group of 4, soon joined by a few Freedmen's representatives from Meereen and Astapor who'd been alerted to the meeting. The group set about discussing the question of Volantis, the state of the Grand Dragon pits, and the continuing transformation of Slavers' Bay into a seat of power. The Freedmen's representatives, a middle-aged man named Halak from Meereen and a younger woman named Curl from Astapor, listened intently, though they seemed hesitant to speak until Daenerys encouraged them. Halak cleared his throat. Your Graces, if I may call you that, my fellow freedmen in Meereen believe we should prioritize fortifying what we've won. There are rumors of hidden cults of old slaver families regrouping. We've also heard that some watchers from Volantis lurk near our river ports, taking measure of our forces. Could they be spies? Varros nodded. Undoubtedly, they send spies. We do the same in their lands when we can. That is the nature of these times. The question is whether we let them gather enough information to act decisively against us. For that reason, a direct approach might benefit us. Offer them a treaty or an ultimatum, but do not let them remain in the shadows. Curl folded her hands on the table, her soft voice bearing conviction. We freedmen in Astapor appreciate the stability you've brought, but we worry about spreading ourselves thin. If we move on Volantis while we still have pockets of unrest in Meereen, might that not embolden traitors here? Oberyn tapped the table lightly. A fair concern, but Daenerys has never been one to let traitors fester. The Freedmen's Councils have the resources to keep an eye out so long as we maintain strong garrisons. Meanwhile, a diplomatic mission to Volantis can proceed. We do not necessarily need a full invasion. Daenerys smiled at the younger woman's earnestness. Curl, your caution is wise. We won't rush blindly. A single envoy or small force might sail to Volantis under a banner of parley. If they open their gates, we talk. If they refuse, we gain clarity on their stance. Jon interjected. We might also consider the construction pace of these dragon pits. The building of such grand enclosures is not trivial. If we foresee conflict or the eventual presence of many dragons beyond the bay, maybe Volantis itself needs a demonstration to ensure no illusions remain about our power. But also, we must ensure each city has a stable pit if the dragons roam widely. Varos tented his fingers, leaning forward. Precisely. We require a network of these enclosures across Slaver's Bay to house and manage the beasts. Old Valyria thrived because dragons were integrated into every aspect of civilization, from transport to warfare to architecture. We can replicate that, but it demands labor, resources, and time. We must weigh that against any push to expand further. A hush fell around the table. The freedmen's representatives shared thoughtful glances. Indeed, though the freedmen toiled tirelessly, out of gratitude or necessity, they were not infinite in number, and every project demanded manpower. The forging of a legion, the building of pits, the reconstruction of cities damaged by subjugation, the oversight of new freedmen's councils, these tasks already strained their capacity. Adding a new campaign might risk overreach. Daenerys's expression grew resolute. Then let me propose a course of action. We continue building the Grand Dragon pits in Astapor, Yunkai, and Meereen. We secure our domain with thorough patrols and quell any lingering slaver rebellion. Simultaneously, we dispatch a diplomatic envoy to Volantis, led perhaps by one of the Freedmen's Council members or a neutral figure, supported by a small retinue of legionnaires and accompanied by a dragon or two to show we do not come in weakness. If Volantis entertains our approach, we discuss terms. If they reject us or threaten war, we bring the matter back here for a more forceful response. Varos murmured approval. A balanced approach. Let the Triarchs of Volantis see we do not fear them, but also that we do not intend to burn everything on a whim. If they cling to slavery, our message will be clear. The age of chains is ended. They can adapt or be conquered. Oberyn's lips curved in a half-smile. One wonders how King Robert might react if we peacefully unify Essos, possibly with fear. But that is a worry for another day, unless Westeros makes it urgent. Jon looked thoughtful, eyes flicking over the map pinned at the center of the table. If the envoy sails soon, who leads it? Daenerys, you can't be spared here, not with so many tasks. Varos, you are vital to the overall vision. Oberyn might be suited, yet his name and reputation carry their own complexities. Maybe a freedman? But would Volantis show them proper respect? Daenerys exhaled slowly, reflecting on the conundrum. True, they might dismiss freedmen as beneath them, yet sending one of us might seem too great a gesture or risk. Perhaps a moderate choice would be a combination. A Freedmen's Council official, accompanied by a minor noble sympathetic to our cause, along with a small cadre of Dothraki, unsullied, and a lesser dragon to highlight our power. Enough to ensure safety without implying immediate war. Curl perked up, though she did not volunteer, having little inclination for a dangerous envoy mission. Halak shrugged mildly. I can name a freedman from Meereen well-versed in diplomacy, once ascribed to a prominent slaver, ironically. He knows their protocols and has learned from us. That might suffice. Jon turned to Varos. And which dragon do we send? Something large enough to impress, but not so colossal as to devour the entire harbor at will. Varos's brow rose, a hint of amusement. We have options. One of the mid-sized dragons, perhaps. Regal or a similarly grown beast among my brood. Enough to make them tremble, yet not so unstoppable that we risk losing an apex creature if betrayal occurs. Daenerys nodded, scribbling notes on a parchment. Very well. Let's finalize that envoy plan by day's end. They can depart within a fortnight, giving us time to prepare. Meanwhile, we intensify the building of these grand pits to ensure every major city in the bay can house dragons without chaos. Oberyn let out a low whistle. Grand designs indeed. Old Valyria would marvel at your ambitions. Freedmen forging a new empire, dragons overhead, and the entire East trembling. I'd call it a legend in the making. Daenerys allowed herself a small smile, though her eyes carried the weight of the burdens. Legends or not, it must be done carefully. I won't become what I despised. Let these pits stand as symbols of controlled power, not tyranny. Jon studied her face, remembering the quiet words they'd shared about not losing the moral high ground. He offered a supportive nod. We're with you. The Freedmen's Councils trust your intentions. Varos's legions ensure no enemy can overrun us. Let caution guide us, but not cowardice. Varos tapped the table to refocus. Then we proceed. Conquest of Slaver's Bay is complete, though we remain watchful for lingering pockets of rebellion. The Freedmen's Councils operate in each city, with our garrisons ensuring security. Now, by forging these grand pits, we anchor the dragons. By sending an envoy to Volantis, we test the waters of further expansion or at least negotiation. Let us hope the Triarchs do not repeat the folly of the slavers. Oberyn stood, adjusting his leather vest. An excellent plan. I'll assist in selecting the guards if you wish. My experience with foreign courts might help. Although I suspect you prefer I remain near Daenerys for counsel. Let me know your preference. Daenerys glanced at him. Stay for now. You have a knack for reading people that might serve me better here. Send lesser emissaries. Ones who can handle themselves but do not cause uproar if attacked. We have lost enough key figures in far-off places. They shared a moment of solemn reflection, recalling how dangerous missions had claimed many. Then Varos dismissed the freedmen's representatives with a gentle wave. Halak and Curl departed to handle local governance tasks, while the four main figures, Daenerys, Varos, Jon, and Oberyn, remained to finalize details. The early afternoon sun cast thick rays through the chamber's high windows, glinting on the polished suits of unsullied armor that lined the walls. Daenerys rose, walking toward one window that offered a panoramic view of Astapor. The blocks of new housing, the busy squares, the half-finished domes. It was a testament to how quickly the freedmen had seized the chance to mold their own destinies. The city might once have stunk of death and oppression, but now it breathed possibility. Down near the harbor, sails fluttered. Some black and crimson with the Valyrian sigil, others bearing Daenerys's three-headed dragon. The effect was a tapestry of unity. Sometimes, Daenerys said softly, I wonder if the realm we shape here can truly endure. Will freedmen remain loyal once the threat of old slavers fades? Will the dragons become a fearsome shadow that haunts them, or a beacon of protection? Slaver's Bay is free, but it's also fragile. Jon moved beside her, arms crossed. They've pinned their hopes on you, on Varos's might, on the ideals we promised. The Freedmen Councils are new, untested, but each city knows what it was like under the old regime. They won't want that back. At least for a generation or two, loyalty should hold. Varos, from behind them, let out a quiet hum. And by then, we will have deeply entrenched the new ways. The Lord of Light's flame shows me that fear can morph into reverence if guided properly. The freedmen are forging an identity as part of a grand cause. They are not simply discarding chains. They are joining a civilization that upholds them as equals. Oberyn gave a slight tilt of his head. All well and good, but never underestimate mortal ambition. Freedmen might seek positions of power, might jockey for influence in the councils or the new legions. If not handled with fairness, schisms could arise, and you may face internal strife. Another reason to keep these cities strongly garrisoned, yes. Daenerys sighed, leaning on the window's ledge. Yes, garrisoning is a must, though I hate that we must rely so heavily on threat of force. Then again, the world never changes peacefully. The night we fought the Night King taught me that some evils only yield to strength. They lapsed into silence, each recalling that epic confrontation of living flame against undead frost. Even now, the memory could inspire nightmares. The dead surging unstoppable, until dragons rained fire and the combined armies of men stood together. The hush ended when Varos gently cleared his throat. We have no fresh tidings from Westeros, correct? Daenerys shook her head. None. The envoy we sent has not returned, nor any raven from Robert. We can only assume they deliberate, possibly watchful, possibly mustering forces, just in case. Jon allowed a faint frown. If they muster, we'll know from the ships that pass near the stepstones or the watchers we placed in pentos. But if war is Robert's decision, we'll not be caught off guard. Let's pray it doesn't come to that. Varos's expression turned reflective. The Lord of Light's flame reveals indefinite futures. I do not see a guaranteed war with Westeros. Perhaps caution will prevail there as it does here. Let us remain steadfast in building the new Valyria. That, I believe, is R'hlloreth's will. They concluded their private conversation soon after, stepping out into the palace corridors and rejoining the swirl of freedmen officials, officers, and scribes. Each day in Astapor felt both triumphant and burdened with a sense that greater storms might loom beyond the horizon. Yet, for the freedmen who had never tasted such freedom, each day was also a gift. As the sun reached its zenith, caravans bearing stone and lumber from outlying regions rumbled into the city, reinforcing the grand dragon pits that had become central to the architectural transformation. When midday passed, Daenerys, Oberyn, Jon, and Varos gathered anew in a smaller council chamber. Maps of Volantis were laid out on a large table, detailing the massive city straddling the mouth of the River Rhoyne. It boasted high walls, a powerful fleet, and an aristocracy that clung to the old ways, slavery included. They pored over routes, possible vantage points for negotiations, and the question of how best to approach the Triarchs who ruled Volantis. Daenerys tapped the map lightly. We can sail from Myreen's port. The crossing is not long, but we must bring a show of strength. If they sense weakness, they might refuse to dismantle their slave trade. If they see an entire armada of dragons overhead, we risk scaring them into allying with other free cities against us. We must strike a balance. Oberyn drummed his fingers along the map's edge. A single mid-sized dragon, as discussed, plus a small retinue of Valyrian legionnaires and freedmen advisors, might suffice to show seriousness without implying invasion. We can always hold more dragons in reserve, out of sight, if a demonstration is needed. Jon pointed to the city's lesser gates. One potential approach is to request an official audience. If the Triarchs agree, we present Daenerys' terms for a ban on slavery, offering trade or alliance in return. If they refuse or provoke us, we can decide next steps. The Freedmen's Councils might see it as a final test of whether we aim to free all of Essos or just Slavers Bay. Varos nodded. Yes, let them see that conquest is not inevitable, but neither is it off the table if they cling to abominations. We must ensure the new dragon pits are sufficiently advanced here, so the bulk of our beasts remain safe. We can't risk a sabotage in our absence. The plan crystallized. They set a timeline of 3 or 4 weeks to finalize the building of the grand pits enough to house all dragons that soared over Slavers Bay, then form an envoy to Volantis. With each step, the freedmen's legions grew, as more men and women from Yunkai and Myreen answered the call, forging a disciplined body under the combined training of unsullied veterans and Valyrian officers. In that final stretch of weeks, the entire region buzzed with activity. Obedient to Daenerys' promise, no child was forced into service. Freedmen volunteered. Surplus food from newly organized farms reached the cities, ensuring no famine struck. The Freedmen's Councils resolved local disputes, while Daenerys occasionally presided over major cases involving treacherous slavers or freedmen who committed crimes. Her judgments tended to be firm but not cruel, reinforcing that the new empire offered justice, not just another brand of tyranny. Jon, for his part, oversaw dragon pit construction near Meereen for a time, riding Drogon between the cities to coordinate. The pits themselves were feats of engineering. Massive domes with high vaulted arches, anchored by thick buttresses designed to withstand the might and flame of dragons, reminiscent of legends about Balerions' holds in King's Landing. Freedmen's stonemasons, having discovered a new sense of purpose, worked with zeal, mixing old Giscari stonecraft techniques with the emerging architectural knowledge gleaned from Varos's Valyrian enclaves. In Astapor, Oberyn found satisfaction in guiding freedmen's councils on matters of civic structure. Rare for a man known as a warrior and lover, but he had an eye for strategy. He participated in some final planning sessions, ensuring that once Daenerys and Varos turned their eyes beyond Slaver's Bay, no chaos would unravel the progress made. The freedmen came to appreciate him, seeing that behind his flamboyance lay a genuine commitment to their cause. And so, by the end of that 3-week period, Slaver's Bay was stable, though not without underlying tensions. The final tasks on Daenerys's list included a solemn ceremony celebrating the completion of each city's initial dragon pit. She traveled between them, accompanied by Varos, Jon, and occasionally Oberyn, to bless the structures, to show freedmen that the might of dragons was not meant to terrorize them, but to protect them from any resurgence of slavery. During these ceremonies, throngs of freedmen cheered, chanting praises to Daenerys as the breaker of chains, to Varos as the herald of the Lord of Light, and to the dragons as living guardians of the new era. On a crisp dawn in Astapor, with the final pit freshly completed, Daenerys summoned her entire council for a culminating assembly in the largest chamber. For grand braziers burned along the room's perimeter, a circle of freedmen's representatives, legion officers, and her closest advisors forming the heart of the gathering. This was to be the final reflection before turning to the question of Volantis in earnest. Varos announced with a resonant voice. At last, Slaver's Bay stands united, bound in freedmen's councils, defended by the might of our new legions, graced by the presence of dragons. The old chains are broken. Our next step concerns Volantis, the first free city beyond our immediate domain. Should they choose to remain in slavery, do we challenge them? Or do we merely open dialogue and let them decide if they provoke us? A hush fell, broken by Oberyn. Open dialogue first. That was our consensus. Show them we do not crave war, only that we demand the end of slavery. If they refuse, well, we have our answer. Jon added, we can form an envoy soon. Now that the pits are done, we can house our dragons safely while a smaller, more mobile group sails to Volantis. If the Triarchs see reason, so much the better. If not, the Freedmen's legions are prepared. Daenerys faced the Freedmen's Council delegates who had come from across Slaver's Bay, some newly arrived by barge that very dawn. Your cities have demonstrated that life without chains is possible, that a society can reorder itself with fairness and discipline. If Volantis believes otherwise, we show them your example. Let them see that we are not conquerors for personal glory, but deliverers of justice. Let them see the dragons, tangible proof of our power. The freedmen delegates bowed their heads in agreement, each reflecting the pride their people felt in forging this new realm. Daenerys continued, speaking to the entire assembly. If the Triarchs reject our demands or threaten us, we will not hesitate to defend this new order. But we must also keep an eye on Westeros. A messenger from King Robert could arrive soon with acceptance or rebuke. Let us not be caught in illusions. We have staked a claim that might unnerve the 7 kingdoms. Varos inclined his head. The Lord of Light's flame reveals many possible outcomes. Some show a world united by dragons, others a world torn by wars. We do not yearn for war, yet we cannot shy from it if forced. For now, let us unify behind the next mission. Approach Volantis with an envoy, gauge their response. The meeting concluded with that resolution. Freedmen's Council's representatives left to prepare relevant documents, while Legion officers returned to their duties. Daenerys, Varos, Jon, and Oberyn lingered in the chamber's quiet aftermath, exchanging glances that hinted at shared relief and subdued apprehension. Oberyn broke the silence with a wry grin. We have so much power, yet we tiptoe like dancers around the question of how to wield it. I'd say that is a sign of wisdom, or indecision. Hard to tell. Jon folded his arms, voice calm. Best to err on caution. We remember too well what the White Walkers nearly accomplished when people were divided. We can't unify the entire world by burning it. Fear might coerce compliance, but it won't build trust. Varros turned to Daenerys. So the next stage is set. We dispatch an envoy. We hold our dragons in readiness. Meanwhile, Slavers Bay grows stable. Freedmen's councils entrench themselves, and the grand pits stand ready to house beasts from across old Valyria. Daenerys breathed in deeply, recalling the dusty smell of stone warmed by the braziers. Yes, the region stands at our feet, but we must ensure we rule it kindly, or else we become no better than the slavers. Let the freedmen flourish, let them keep faith in us, and let the world see we are not mindless conquerors. A final hush passed among them. The newly minted empire in Slavers Bay was a reality. Dragons soared overhead, freedmen's legions patrolled the streets, grand pits waited to house the creatures of myth, and the old institutions lay in ruin. The next question, looming larger each day, was how to handle Volantis, and beyond Volantis, the entire tapestry of Essos. The memory of the Night King's defeat in Westeros remained a shared reminder that unity was the surest shield against unimaginable horrors. Yet the emerging might of New Valyria, anchored by Daenerys' moral resolve and Varros' arcane flame, might well shape a future in which no horrors could stand unchallenged. Whether this unstoppable alliance would meet acceptance or trigger universal war remained the greatest enigma. Varros stood beneath the vaulted colonnade of the palace in Astapor, the city's red bricks glowing under the noonday sun. Around him, a swirl of servants and scribes bustled, bearing parchments, ledgers, and scrolls adorned with the flame and dragon sigils that denoted the newly formed Valyrian freehold. The air was tangibly hot, spiced with the desert breeze and the tang of old charred stone, scars from the years of upheaval. Daenerys had liberated the city, and now it thrived under her governance and the watchful presence of dozens of dragons, who were gradually taking up residence in the newly constructed pits. Astapor, once the site of unspeakable cruelty, had transformed into a seat of power and hope. Yet Varros' face betrayed neither triumph nor complacency. Instead, he wore an expression of measured resolve. He beckoned to a small cluster of red priests standing at the edge of the courtyard. Their crimson robes shimmered, and each carried a staff topped with an orb of living fire, an outward symbol of their devotion to the Lord of Light. They came forward with quiet, confident steps, bowing in unison when they reached Varros, who acknowledged them with a nod. One among them, a priest named Jaraxo, spoke in a low voice. "We have prepared our final letters, O Herald of the Flame. Once we depart for the free cities, we will proclaim the will of R'hllor in every market, every temple, every back alley where souls yearn for deliverance. Our smaller retinues wait at the docks, ready to sail." Varros cast his gaze around, taking in the silhouette of half-finished dragon pits in the distance, the bustle of freedmen in the renovated streets. "And you understand, Jaraxo, that you go not as conquerors but as messengers. We do not seek to impose war in every corner, only to spread the words that old Valyria has returned, that the Lord of Light calls for an end to the abomination of slavery. Each city that hears your sermons must choose: accept the dawning of fire and freedom, or remain chained to archaic iniquity. If they resist the truth, we have other means." Jaraxo inclined his head, brandishing a humble smile. "We do, my lord. We shall not invite open revolt in each city. Our presence alone, along with the rumors from Slavers Bay, should stir hearts to question the old ways. And if their lords, their princes or triarchs or archons or whomever they follow, choose ignorance, the consequences are on them." Varros' voice held a note of finality. "Proceed with zeal but remain prudent. Avoid inciting outright conflict. We do not want to trigger a united front among the free cities. Let them see we bring truth, not indiscriminate bloodshed." The priests bowed again, then filed out of the courtyard toward the gates. accompanied by a handful of freedmen legionnaires who had volunteered to safeguard them. Over the coming weeks, they would sail in small bands to Myr, Lys, Tyrosh, and beyond. Some might venture to Braavos, though that city prided itself on neutrality and did not readily countenance fervent fire-preaching. The plan was not to subjugate the free cities yet, but to prime them for the possibility that Daenerys's new Valyria might demand their compliance if they clung to slavery. This subtle interplay of faith, politics, and looming draconic might was at the heart of Varos's design. He turned at the sound of footsteps and recognized Daenerys Targaryen's quiet approach, her silver-gold hair catching rays of sunlight. Beside her walked Jon Snow and Oberyn Martell. The trio had formed a sort of inner circle with Varos in recent months. Daenerys as queen and moral compass, Jon bridging the gap between Westeros and Essos, and Oberyn acting as an ever-curious observer and strategist of the new empire. Their expressions varied. Daenerys carrying a thoughtful calm, Jon's brow lined with a stoic tension, and Oberyn exuding a faint but irrepressible smirk. Daenerys offered a respectful nod to the departing priests. They make for the free cities, then? It's an ambitious move, Varos. If the Red Priests preach the end of slavery everywhere, some might suspect we plan invasion. Varos gave a small, guarded smile. They might suspect, but it is better they suspect than remain complacent. As we strengthen Slavers Bay, we cannot allow the rest of Essos to ignore our example. Word alone may suffice to break the illusions of Old Dominion. If not, your dragons will remind them that the days of chaining men are gone. Oberyn folded his arms, scanning the courtyard with a faintly amused expression. You certainly love a grand gesture, Varos. Still, caution might be wise. Volantis is the first in line to feel threatened by our presence, given how close it lies to Slavers Bay. If these red priests arrive there spouting messages of Lollarest's chosen queen and a resurrected Valyria, the Triarchs may decide to unify the free cities against us. Jon Snow glanced at Oberyn. Or they may kneel faster than the slavers in Yunkai. They might see sense, especially if the priests mention dragons. Even the proud can yield when dragonfire stands at their gates. A shadow passed overhead, and the group looked skyward, seeing one of Daenerys's mid-sized dragons circling lazily over the half-constructed dome that would become Astapor's largest dragon pit. Its molten eyes glinted as it surveyed the sprawl beneath, searching for a place to roost. The presence of so many dragons, varied in age and size, had become the new normal in Slavers Bay, yet the sight never ceased to spark awe. Daenerys took a breath, stepping to the edge of the terrace and watching the beast gracefully descend onto a nearby ledge. Even I must remind myself that not so long ago, we fought the Night King in the north, uncertain whether we'd see another sunrise. Now we speak of forging a new Valyria, with dragons in such abundance that we must construct entire pits just to house them. The transformations we witness are staggering. Oberyn mirrored her position, leaning on the low parapet. True enough, the memory of that battle still wakes me with chills. The dead near victory, only to be thwarted by living flame. All of Westeros's petty feuds seemed trivial in that darkness. Now, ironically, Westeros has returned to its feuds and to worry about Essos's rise. Jon, arms folded over his chest, said quietly, Westeros has a knack for self-deception. Some might say the defeat of the Night King was a lucky stroke, or that the threat was exaggerated. Robert Baratheon might claim that we Targaryen-aligned forces. He paused, glancing at Daenerys and then Varos, posed a new menace. Perhaps these priests stoking the flames of the Lord of Light in the free cities will make him even more suspicious. Varos let out a small chuckle, though no joy reflected in it. If suspicion kept men from descending into tyranny, I'd welcome it. But let us not digress. I've sent the priests to spread the word. Meanwhile, we must address the Valyrian elite who traveled with me from the enclaves near Old Valyria. They have begun arriving in Astapor, hoping to entrench themselves in the new empire. They see Daenerys as the apex Targaryen queen, but they also have centuries of hidden pedigree. There may be friction. Daenerys raised an eyebrow. Friction in what sense? Do they question my authority, or the Freedmen's Council's? Are they devout to the Lord of Light, or simply loyal to their families? Varos shook his head. A mix. Some hold to old aristocratic traditions. They claim the Valyrian blood grants them a station above freedmen or other lords. Others are genuine believers in forging a better world, as you do. But the colliding of your freedman-based vision with their ancient lineage may cause tensions. They're proud, sometimes haughty, much like the Targaryens of old. Already, a few have expressed curiosity about how you govern freedmen's councils. They find it unconventional. Oberyn snorted softly. Unconventional indeed. Well, at least we can share good wine while they voice their concerns. I, for one, find such encounters educational. Might we arrange a gathering to let them voice their mind openly? Better to see potential strife in the open than let it fester in whispers. Daenerys nodded. Yes, a formal reception, perhaps. Let them meet Jon, me, and some freedmen representatives. We can show them that respect is earned, not demanded by old pedigrees alone. If they wish to integrate into the new Valyria, they must accept freedmen as equals. Jon watched her face, noticing the resolve. I'll stand with you. The freedmen's councils might appreciate us bridging that gap. Any who harbor illusions of subjugating freedmen again will be sorely disappointed. Varos gestured for them to accompany him toward one of the palace's broad corridors. Then come. We'll organize a meeting in the largest audience chamber. The newly arrived Valyrian families can gather this evening. You might glean insight into their hearts and they yours. If friction arises, let it be addressed swiftly. As evening descended, the hall filled with the ambient glow of torches and the flicker of braziers that lent the space a dramatic interplay of light and shadow. Oberyn arrived first, wearing elegant leathers and a sly grin, conferring with Freedmen's Council delegates who stood near the dais. Daenerys, in a flowing gown of pale lilac, took her seat near the head of the table, with Jon Snow at her side, dressed in subdued black and red. Varos approached, wearing his customary robes of crimson and black, the symbol of R'hllor embroidered across his chest. They were soon joined by the Freedmen's Council representatives, a half-dozen men and women from across Yunkai, Meereen, and Astapor, each eager yet uneasy about meeting the rumored Valyrian elite. Then the new arrivals began entering. A dozen or so individuals from the hidden enclaves, men and women whose bearing exuded old patrician grace. They wore robes or tunics in deep red or black, embroidered with draconic motifs reminiscent of an empire long vanished. The eldest among them, a man with silver hair and stern features named Caloras, stepped forward. He offered Daenerys a low, deliberate bow. The others followed suit, though some performed the gesture more stiffly. "Your Grace," Caloras said, voice measured. "We come at Varos's summons, having left the enclaves near the smoking sea to join in this grand forging of a new Valyria. It is our honor to meet the blood of Targaryen, our sister in the flame." Daenerys rose from her seat, returning a polite, if somewhat cool, smile. "Welcome to Astapor. We appreciate your journey. Varos spoke of you as keepers of old Valyrian lore, hidden for centuries after the Doom. I hope you find this realm's transformation inspiring rather than disconcerting." Caloras and the others exchanged subtle glances. Another figure, a young woman named R'hllor with braided silver hair, added, "We have heard wondrous and unsettling stories. Dragons reborn in the West, freedmen's councils supplanting centuries of slavery, red priests proclaiming the Lord of Light's dominion. Our enclaves had always believed that the day might come to restore the ancient empire, but we scarcely expected it to be done in such a moral fashion." At that, a faint tension crossed the freedmen's delegates. The subtle implication that Valyria's moral dimension was a novelty hinted at an ingrained elitism. Daenerys's voice remained calm. "We recognized that repeating old Valyria's cruelties would doom us. We reject slavery, we reject tyranny for tyranny's sake. Our dragons and armies serve to liberate, not to oppress." Varos inclined his head, echoing Daenerys' stance. "Precisely. The flame of R'hllor burns away darkness, not to inflict torment on the innocent. Our cause is righteous, and these freedmen councils embody that righteousness in every city." Jon studied the newcomers' faces. Some seemed open to the notion. Others bore the faintly disapproving set of lips that accompanied a noble heritage forced to bow to freedmen. Eager to quell potential conflict, he invited them to sit. Servants poured wine into gleaming cups. Oberyn, never shy, took the initiative to raise a toast. To the new Valyria, shaped by Daenerys' compassion and Varys' flame, may we not lose ourselves in arrogance along the way. Polite chuckles arose, though some coughed or twitched at the subtext. Caloras sipped from his wine, then cleared his throat. We do admire your success in subduing Slavers Bay, your grace, but we wonder at the freedmen's councils. Many of us believe that governance is best handled by those bred for leadership, with old bloodlines that carry knowledge from generations. Can freedmen truly govern themselves with wisdom and caution? A hush fell. Daenerys responded steadily. They have proved more than capable. Freed slaves understand the hardships of life under tyranny. Given a chance, they manage civic life with empathy and diligence. Our role is to ensure stability, yes, but freedmen's councils reflect the moral foundation of this new realm. We do not intend to replicate the old Valyria's aristocratic hierarchy in which commoners had no voice. That path fosters resentment and revolt. Rhalyna sipped her wine, curiosity dancing in her eyes. You speak with conviction, your grace. Perhaps we must adapt our traditions. Our enclaves have been governed by councils of bloodlines for centuries, but we see your freedmen have formed councils driven by merit, not birth. Varys suggested we might integrate, so we come to observe. Oberyn leaned forward with a smile. Look around. Freedmen walk these halls as equals. The old slave masters who remain do so by pledging to end their vile customs. Dragons circle overhead to ensure compliance. If you remain open-minded, you'll find the freedman system is a testament to progress, not chaos. Caloras exhaled, placing his cup on the table. We shall observe with open minds. Still, some among us wonder, if we unify all Essos, will freedmen's councils rule every corner of the continent? What place is left for families of ancient Valyrian blood? Varys cast a sharp gaze. There is a place for those who serve the cause of liberation. Blood alone does not entitle one to dominion here. If your families wish to stand with Daenerys Targaryen in forging a new empire built on justice, they may find roles in the Legion, in administration, in scholarship. But if you cling to illusions of innate superiority, you will discover that the freedmen have strength unimaginable. Daenerys added softly, you may see leadership roles among the freedmen's councils open to all who demonstrate capability and loyalty. The dragons do not care about birth when choosing riders. They sense spirit, conviction, and the intangible spark. So, too, does this realm judge a person's merit. A thoughtful silence followed. Then Rhalyna offered a slow nod, seemingly impressed. It is indeed a new way. We have much to learn. May we remain in Astapor to witness these freedmen councils, to study the Legion's training? We do not wish to stand idle. Daenerys inclined her head in consent. You are welcome. In the coming weeks, we plan to dispatch an envoy to Volantis. The freedmen's councils are stable here, and the dragon pits near completion. If you show genuine willingness, you may join or observe. But know that if Volantis proves hostile, we must be ready for conflict. Jon parted his lips, wanting to ease the moment. And if Volantis sees reason, we might expand peacefully. No need for more bloodshed if they willingly abandon slavery, as Yunkai and Meereen did. This is how we build trust. Caloras exchanged a glance with Rhalyna, then addressed Daenerys. We are at your disposal, your grace. Our enclaves yearned for the day Valyria might stir again, though we never expected it in such a moral frame. We shall adapt or fade. Varys laced his fingers together, satisfied for now. Adaptation is the path forward. The Lord of Light's flame demands we do not replicate the cruelties of old. Join us in forging something stronger, purer. We appreciate your presence here. With that, the evening progressed into a mingling of freedmen's delegates, Valyrian enclaves, and Daenerys' closest advisors. Servants circulated with platters of spiced meats, fresh fruits grown along the newly reclaimed farmland outside Astapor. Wine flowed, chatter rose in an uneven buzz. Every so often, tension crackled. Some from freedmen uncertain about these aristocratic newcomers, some from aristocrats struggling to see freedmen as equals. Yet the atmosphere remained cordial, if cautious. Daenerys traversed the chamber, making sure to greet each new arrival personally. Oberyn lingered near one side, flirting lightly with a minor freedwoman official from Meereen, who blushed at his attentions. Jon stood at Daenerys' side much of the time, occasionally interjecting with supportive remarks or clarifications about Legion training. Varros, silent and observant, drifted in the background, stepping in only when a heated question about the Lord of Light's doctrines emerged. He would calmly quell concerns, reminding listeners that the faith demanded justice, not oppression. In one corner, Daenerys paused to speak with a freedman named Darrow, who had once been forced to fight in Yunkai's pits. He was now a mid-level officer in the Freedmen's Legion. "Your Grace," Darrow said, voice trembling with respect. "We see these Valyrian elite arriving, claiming lineage that spans back to the days before the Doom. They talk of old glory. Are we sure they won't try to overshadow us freedmen, re-establishing a new tyranny behind your back?" She placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "I will not allow tyranny to return, Darrow, from them or anyone else. You and your Legion fellows stand as the heart of our new empire. These enclaves must accept that freedmen are equals. Should they try otherwise, they will face me and my dragons and the councils. Fear not." He exhaled in relief. "Thank you, Your Grace. We just needed to hear it plainly." Nearby, one of the younger Valyrian arrivals, a slender man named Farron, overheard and approached politely. "I do not wish to intrude, but your freedmen should also know some among us wholeheartedly embrace this new order. We cherish the heritage of Valyria, but we do not yearn to subjugate anyone. Let them not mistake all of us for stiff-necked snobs." Daenerys managed a grateful smile, seeing the exchange. "That is good to hear, Farron. We hope for a genuine alliance of hearts. The freedmen here have sacrificed too much to be subjugated again." Farron nodded, turning to Darrow. "I might be less skilled in arms than you, but I have studied Valyrian engineering. Perhaps we can collaborate on these new dragon pits, or on building fortifications in Meereen. Let us share knowledge. That is how an empire grows strong." Darrow regarded him cautiously, then nodded. "If your knowledge benefits the freedmen's cause, we welcome it." A spark of mutual respect flickered between them. Daenerys stepped away, satisfied that dialogues like this could bridge gaps. She found Jon once more, who was sampling a goblet of chilled wine. "You see," she said softly, "it's not all friction. Some of them approach freedmen with earnestness. Maybe we can unify these enclaves." Jon drained a sip. "I hope so. The last thing we need is an internal power struggle. With the Red Priests now fanning out to the free cities, we're risking that a coalition might form to quash us. Our house must not be divided from within." Varros approached, having just spoken with Oberyn across the room. Yes, ironically, Oberyn pointed out that a cohesive message from us might deter the free cities from unifying in panic. If they see we're stable, if they see freedmen working alongside aristocrats from the enclaves in harmony, they might not rush to form alliances or preemptive strikes. A hush took hold as a distant roar echoed through the night sky. The group glanced upward, aware that a large shape soared overhead. One of Varros's older dragons, patrolling the outskirts of Astapor. It was a stark reminder that while the scene in the palace brimmed with civilized conversation and a veneer of politeness, raw power circled above, ready to defend or to bring destruction if needed. Conversations continued late into the night, interspersed with feasting and mild festivities. Freedmen delegates and Valyrian enclaves found themselves forging new acquaintances, tentatively united by the wonder of living in a land shaped by dragons and the memory of the White Walkers near triumph. The chatter carried occasionally to the subject of Westeros. Some aristocrats expressed an air of curiosity, a faint arrogance that they might surpass even the Targaryen kings of old who once conquered the Seven Kingdoms. Jon calmly reminded them that Daenerys had no immediate intention of waging war across the Narrow Sea, that the new empire focused on ending slavery, not seeking every throne. The presence of freedmen underscored that vow. They had come to see Daenerys as a liberator, not a conquering tyrant. Eventually, the gathering waned. Valyrian families retired to guest quarters, freedmen returned to their homes, and Daenerys, Jon, Varys, and Oberyn remained in a smaller sitting room. Servants cleared away the last platters of fruit and carafes of wine. The four sat in chairs arranged near a brazier, a reflective calm settling over them. Oberyn lounged with an easy grace, swirling the dregs of wine in his cup. A successful evening, I'd say. The new arrivals seemed, well, mostly impressed by what they saw. Freedmen and old Valyria in one hall without bloodshed. Perhaps we can replicate this on a grander scale for the entire continent. Jon rubbed his temple, tiredness etched on his face. One city at a time, Oberyn, or one region at a time at least. If these enclaves from near old Valyria can accept freedmen's governance, maybe Volantis can be swayed. But we know Volantis is bigger, prouder, stuck in old traditions of slavery. Daenerys leaned forward, arms on her knees. We remain patient. The Red Priests have already gone to spread the word of the Lord of Light's new dawn. Let the Triarchs see that we are not so easily daunted. We will wait a short while to see if they respond. Varys offered a small nod, eyes flicking with that perpetual spark of prophecy. The Lord of Light's flame seldom reveals a single future. Yet I sense that if Volantis chooses to resist us, the confrontation may be swift and decisive. We hold the dragons, the freedmen legions, the moral high ground. They hold centuries of wealth and powerful connections to the rest of Essos. We cannot be complacent. Daenerys rose, pacing lightly across the mosaic floor. I know, but Slaver's Bay must be fully consolidated first. Let the Freedmen's Councils root out any last slaver sympathizers. Let the new Valyrian legions finish training. Then, if Volantis either sues for peace or readies for war, we'll be prepared. Silence reigned for a few moments, each recalling the scope of their tasks. The memory of that day's diplomatic success with the enclaves intermingled with wariness about the cost of future expansions. The construction of Grand Dragon pits in Yunkai and Meereen advanced daily, but finishing them would require labor and resources that might hamper a large-scale campaign. Meanwhile, the Freedmen's Councils demanded continuing oversight from Daenerys or her delegates. The more territory they might claim, the heavier the burden of administration. Oberyn stood, yawning theatrically. It's well past midnight. We should rest. Tomorrow I've a mind to tour those half-finished pits with Jon. Perhaps we'll see if the mid-sized dragons are adjusting to having so many kin around. He threw Jon a conspiratorial wink. And maybe we'll discover if any freedmen blacksmiths can replicate real Valyrian steel weapons, though that might be wishful thinking. Jon gave a faint chuckle. Always the dreamer, Oberyn. But who knows? Varys might have found secrets in old Valyria we can barely imagine. Varos's lips curved subtly. Some secrets remain guarded. The forging of Valyrian steel is an ancient art few enclaves still remember. But the path to it might open if we unify. Let us see. Daenerys watched them all, a slight ache in her chest. She recalled how once she had been a young girl sold to a Dothraki call, forced to survive by cunning and luck. Now the entire Bay looked to her as queen, champion of freedmen, mistress of countless dragons, ally to Varos's ancient might, and partner to Jon's quiet sense of honor. The transformation was breathtaking, yet she remained resolute not to lose herself in the swirling power. As the four parted for the night, each prepared in their own way for the next day's tasks. In her private chambers, Daenerys removed her tunic, letting the night's cooler air brush her skin. She stared at her reflection in a polished bronze mirror, seeing in her own eyes the reflection of a woman both proud and burdened. She hoped that sending the Red Priests into the free cities would kindle curiosity more than fear. She had no desire for a war of continents, though she recognized the hypocrisy that her unstoppable might inevitably cast shadows far beyond Slaver's Bay. Jon, resting in his own quarters, stared at the flickering candle flame, recalling the White Walker's onslaught, hearing the distant roars of dragons. He found solace in the knowledge that freedmen were free indeed here, that Yunkai and Meereen no longer subjugated innocents. Yet a kernel of worry gnawed at him. The bigger this empire grew, the more it might threaten Westeros, forcing Ned or Robert to act. Could he mediate, or would fate push him to choose sides again? Sleep came fitfully, dreams swirling with images of dragons clashing in the skies, of Robert's warhammer locked against Valyrian steel, of ice creeping under the gates if some new threat rose unchallenged. Oberyn's quarters rang with the muted chatter of freedmen or lesser nobles he entertained, trading banter over jugs of wine. He thrived in the new environment, bridging freedmen's vigor with the aristocratic flair of the enclaves. Yet beneath his flamboyance lay a strategic mind, reading every shift in the balance of power as a potential advantage. One day he might be recalled to Westeros, or might choose to remain in Essos, forging alliances. Either way, he intended to glean all he could from this evolving empire. Varos retreated to a dim chamber he had converted into a shrine of sorts, with a central brazier that never went out. There, he knelt in silent communion with the flames, seeking glimpses of the future. The flicker of orange and red cast dancing shadows on his austere features, and he muttered half-voiced prayers in High Valyrian. Did he see war with Volantis, or a peaceful path? Did he sense new horrors lurking beyond the horizon? Only Varos knew, and as he concluded his devotions, a pensive expression settled on him. Even he might not glean a certain path from the swirling fire's illusions. The future hinged on myriad choices, from small daily acts to the grand designs of kings and queens. Morning brought a renewed bustle to Astapor. Freedmen carpenters hammered away at scaffoldings around the Grand Dome for the city's biggest dragon pit. Columns rose, and blocks of stone etched with draconic motifs slid into place with the muscle of 1,000 workers. Soldiers trained in the yard, freedmen newly enlisted in the Valyrian legions, brandishing spears under the stern instruction of unsullied veterans. High overhead, dragons soared on the thermals, sometimes diving to snatch prey from the outskirts or to assert dominance in aerial dances. Jon Snow and Oberyn roamed the half-finished pit, stepping around piles of stone and mortar. Craftsmen gave them respectful bows or salutes. The pit's scale dwarfed them, arched doorways tall enough for an adult dragon, interior chambers lined with iron rings for tethering. Overseeing the site was a freedman named Sella, once a city architect forced to labor under cruel slavers, now liberated and enthusiastic. She guided the pair through the labyrinth of corridors, explaining how vents in the roof would let heat and smoke dissipate, how drainage channels would remove waste, how stables of sorts might accommodate smaller draconic creatures. Oberyn mused aloud. Quite the marvel. If you told me some years ago, I'd stand in a pit built to house dozens of dragons in a city once run by slavers, I'd have deemed it a madman's fantasy. Yet here we are. Jon nodded, running a hand along the smooth masonry. It's a symbol of control, too. Dragons soared wild before. When Daenerys had only 3, it was manageable. Now, with Varos's brood added, we have tens, some say nearly 100 across the region, large and small. We need containment. Sella chimed in proudly. Queen Daenerys' vision for a new Valyria demands that we not let dragons rampage. Freedmen, after all, want safety for their children. We respect the beasts, but each must be assigned to a pit or roost, especially the largest. Let them out for hunts or flights, but never to endanger the city. Oberyn gave her a warm grin. You freedmen truly are forging the new order, no question. Keep up this quality, or the dragons themselves might voice their displeasure. He winked, though the subtext was a reminder of power. They parted ways, heading back to the palace where midday council meetings took place. There, Varos and Daenerys awaited them, along with freedmen delegates who had news from Yunkai about building a second major pit. The synergy was palpable. Freedmen building, dragons patrolling, and the new Valyrian presence overshadowing it all. Yet each day, rumors trickled in that the Triarchs of Volantis were uneasy, that the approach of red priests in their city squares was sparking tension, that certain Volantene nobles called for a united front with other free cities to quell this Targaryen dominion before it expanded. Tensions smoldered, even if no open war had erupted, yet, by the time evening fell again, Daenerys decided upon the final composition of the envoy to Volantis. A freedman named Tyranno, once a scribe under a Myrinese archon, would serve as chief diplomat. He had studied oratory, spoke fluent Valyrian, and had proven adept at bridging freedmen and aristocrats. He would be accompanied by a small retinue of freedmen legionnaires, plus a handful of Dothraki outriders for show. The plan was to bring one mid-sized dragon from Daenerys's brood, likely Viserion, to demonstrate power but not to threaten immediate devastation. Oberyn gave a half-joking remark that perhaps he should accompany them to keep them from smashing heads. But Daenerys politely insisted his counsel was needed in Astapor to continue guiding freedmen. Varros concurred, wanting Oberyn's keen political sense at the center of the nascent empire. Varros then turned the discussion to a final matter, the manner of approach. Let them dock at a moderate harbor outside Volantis, not the main piers. We do not want to appear to blockade them. If the Triarchs greet them, fine. If not, they can send a lesser official. Our envoy stands firm but polite. The Red Priests already arrived in the city, hopefully sowing the seeds of interest or fear. This envoy is but the official extension of our cause. Jon rubbed the back of his neck, uneasy. I hope it doesn't devolve into conflict. If Volantis attacks them, we must respond. Correct. Daenerys' eyes hardened. We cannot allow them to slaughter our people. If that happens, we respond swiftly. But let us trust that a show of good faith might be enough. The Triarchs might realize we'd only come in force if provoked. And so it was decided. Over the next couple of days, Tyranno's group prepared, loading supplies onto a lean, swift ship. Daenerys wished them well, reminding them to speak softly, carry the truth, and let the memory of dragons do the rest. The freedmen legionnaires wore polished armor, each bearing the flame dragon sigil. Viserion, harnessed and somewhat restless, would soar overhead once they reached Volantis' outskirts, a menacing but controlled presence. The new Valyrian Empire thus extended a hand of negotiation, aware that any misstep could spark war. Meanwhile, the day after Tyranno's envoy set sail, Varros announced that the new grand pits in Yunkai and Meereen would be operational within a fortnight. Freedmen architects reported swift progress, their morale bolstered by success in Astapor. Daenerys decided to journey personally to Meereen to oversee final touches, traveling with a large retinue and a smaller contingent of dragons, ensuring that no rebellion might simmer behind her back. Jon accompanied her, eager to see how the freedmen's councils in Meereen were functioning. Oberyn remained in Astapor with Varros, assisting with the assimilation of the newly arrived Valyrian elite and continuing the city's transformation into a hub of industry, knowledge, and faith in the Lord of Light. Before Daenerys departed, she and Varros held a brief meeting in a high balcony. The horizon glowed with dawn light, and the calls of merchants drifting upward from the streets below. Varros folded his arms within his robes, expression pensive. We have come far in short months. Slavers' Bay is ours, freedmen flourish, the pits near completion, and the Red Priests spread the Lord of Light's message. Yet we stand on the cusp of new challenges. Do you remain resolved, Daenerys Stormborn? She faced him, the sun picking out strands of gold in her hair. I remain resolved. We did not cast down slavers just to let other corners of Essos perpetuate the trade. If Volantis yields, all the better. If not, I will protect the freedmen from further chains, no matter the cost. Varros bowed his head in deference, acknowledging her stance. Then the Lord of Light blesses your next step. Return from Meereen swiftly, for we must remain united in Astapor if we are forced to respond to any aggression from the Triarchs or from the scurrying alliances they might form. The day may come when we call upon the entire might of dragons and freedmen's legions to finish what we started. Daenerys looked at him solemnly. It won't be the first time I've faced a massive fight, nor you. The memory of the Night King is never far from my heart. That was a battle where all men stood together. Perhaps someday the world will again be forced to unite against a greater evil. But for now, let us avoid war if we can. Varros offered a guarded smile. A queen of compassion indeed. May your compassion guide this new age. With that, she took her leave, heading down to the courtyard where her retinue waited. Jon stood by Drogon, the largest of her personal dragons, ensuring the harness was secure. Freedmen legionnaires formed a protective ring around the queen. The city's populace had gathered to see her off, cheering her name as she climbed onto Drogon's back. The massive dragon stretched his dark wings, prepared for flight. Jon mounted Regal, who had been waiting near the courtyard's outer edge, and the two ascended in a flurry of wings and dust, the freedmen legionnaires and other cavalry traveling along the roads. Watching from the palace balcony, Oberyn turned to Varros. They depart, each time forging deeper bonds with the freedmen. And soon enough, the next wave of challenges will come from beyond this bay. I hope Daenerys is prepared for what Volantis might bring. Varros's gaze lingered on the receding silhouettes of dragons against the sky. She is. We all are. The Lord of Light sees to that. And thus the Empire continued apace. Freedmen shaped their councils. New dragon pits soared to completion. Red priests sailed forth to sow revelations in the free cities, and Daenerys, along with Jon, ventured to Meereen to finalize the region's integration. Rumors of the envoy to Volantis would soon echo across the sea. Among both freedmen and old Valyrian enclaves, hope and unease mingled in equal measure. The line between deliverance and conquest blurred, overshadowed by the dream of an empire bound neither by old blood alone nor by the cruelty of slaves and masters, but by something new, an empire that might reshape Essos entirely. In the hush between roars of dragons, men and women whispered of how far they had come from the nightmares of the Night King and the tyrannies of slavers. Yet the future beckoned with uncertainties as vast as the skies their dragons inhabited.